Welcome to Masters of Enlightenment. This is another segment in our series with Dr. Ahmed Osman, an esteemed scholar who has spent his entire life exploring the contributions of Nile Valley civilization and the empire there on the Nile, known as Egypt to the world, that was created. As we explore his life's work, there are some special characters who we will be discussing in Masters of Enlightenment. These characters are real flesh and blood, not fiction and legend. The Bible has enshrined their names in a special place in our minds and our consciousness. We all know Abraham. We all know David. We all know his son Solomon. We all know Moses. And yes, we all know Jesus the Christ. But are these figures of legend in the Bible fiction or fact? Were these figures real men with real dreams of a better world, a world that they would create that we all have inherited? Dr. Osman said, yes, they were real men, and his life's work has been to reveal them in their humanity and in their love for all of us. And we enjoy the inheritance of their life's work, their achievements, and we learn from their struggles because, like us, they were real human beings. We want to thank Dr. Osman for his work in making this truth come to life, and we want to thank him for sharing this truth in Masters of Enlightenment. Dr. Osman, welcome to this segment of Masters of Enlightenment. We are so happy for the work that you have done. There may be some who are not as pleased as they should be with you humanizing these giant figures, especially the one that we are going to talk about this day, Moses the lawgiver. In your work, you say that Moses the lawgiver of the Bible is in fact Pharaoh Akhenaten of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, called by the Egyptians Kemet. You see similarities in the lives of these two figures that persuade you that they are the same man. And today, we get the benefit of hearing the evidence that you propose to demonstrate that Akhenaten, Pharaoh of Egypt, is in fact Moses, the lawgiver. Dr. Osman, why do you believe that Akhenaten is Moses, the lawgiver?
First of all, when I wrote my first book, I was trying to identify the time of Joseph, the patriarch in history of Egypt, and I came to identify him as the same character as Yuya, who was a minister of Amenhotep III, who ruled at the beginning of the 14th century BC, during the 10th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Once I have identified the time of Joseph in Egypt, then the next step was to look for Moses, because Moses came after Joseph. So what I did really, here I was helped a lot by Sigmund Freud, the Jewish, psychoanalyst who lived in Vienna and came to London in 1939 because he was afraid of the Nazi Germany and so on. Freud wrote a book. The last of his books was not about psychology, but it was about the history of the idea of the Moses and monotheism. It was called Moses and monotheism. In his book, he first said that the birth of Moses is similar in the Bible to the birth of other heroes of the past, like Oedipus of the Greeks and Romulus of Rome and Hercules and Sargon of Mesopotamia. All of these heroes were born, there was a threat on their life when they were born, so they were put in the water and they were saved by some poor families. They came from royal families and they were saved by poor families. And then when they grew up, they realized who their identity was. He said only in the case of Moses, instead of being born to a royal family and be brought up by the poor family, it was switched. The story was switched. I mean, Moses is supposed to be born by a poor Israelite family in Goshen, in Egypt, and be brought up in the royal palace. He said this must be, in his view, a kind of deliberate attempt to hide the true identity of Moses. He thought that Moses was an Egyptian. And at the time, really, after the discovery in 1924 of the tomb of Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings, a lot of understanding of the Amarna kings, Akhenaten, the father of Tutankhamun, and the other came to light. And his daughter Anna was visiting there, telling him all the information. Even he had some object from Egypt sent to him, and it's now in his museum in London. Anyhow, he was interested to know about Akhenaten, and he believed, he saw that the one God of Akhenaten, the monotheistic belief of Akhenaten, is the same. He compared it with the biblical Moses teaching, and he said this is the same thing. And because the idea at the time was that Akhenaten died after ruling for 17 years, he suggested that one of the followers of Akhenaten, Thutmose he called him, took the religion of Akhenaten and gave it to the Israelites in Egypt, and that was Moses. That was his belief. So it was Sigmund Freud really who made me try to look for that after Akhenaten. And when I came to see Akhenaten, obviously Freud, helped me going to Akhenaten, but I realized then, because Joseph Yuya was the grandfather, the maternal grandfather of Akhenaten. You see, Yuya, the daughter of Yuya, Tai, who was the daughter of Joseph, was married to the king of Egypt, Amenhotep III. So, and she gave birth to Akhenaten. So, he was an Egyptian, but he was also an Israelite because his mother was the daughter of Joseph, you see. So, so what happened is, we know that the Queen Tai was completely rejected. This marriage between the king and the queen and Tai, daughter of Joseph, was completely rejected by the Amun priest. Okay, you can have her as a wife, but not as a queen, because the queen has to be your sister from the royal family. However, the king insisted, and he brought earlier, after the marriage, he brought a son from her. She brought him a son called Tutmos. And this son, when he reached the age of 5, his father, Amenhotep III, appointed him as his prince, crown prince, to follow him on the throne. Soon after that, he completely disappeared. Obviously, we don't know. We know about him because some remains of him were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. But how did he disappear? Where did he die? Was he killed? He disappeared. All what we know is that he disappeared completely. Obviously, the priests must have made sure for him to disappear. So when in the year 11 of his rule, Amenhotep III, what happened is, because the Israelites, the family of her father, Joseph, were living in an area called Goshen in northern Sinai, Amenhotep III wanted to allow his wife, the queen, to be near her father's family. So in the city of Zaro, the border city of Zaro, in the same area of Goshen, northern Sinai, it's a border military city. He built her a royal palace there. And in the year 11 of his rule, he dug a pleasure lake. And during that time, he had some kind of a second honeymoon, and she became pregnant. So I can, although there's no evidence for that, I can imagine why the king would fear that if she brings, a boy, gives birth to a boy, it will make a new trouble between him and the priest, and he didn't want that. So I believe this could be the reason why he asked the midwives, if you find a boy, you can get rid of him, kill him or something, not a girl. So this idea is, if you read the Quran agrees with the Bible in the story of Moses' birth, except that he made the mother of Moses was inside the royal palace when the Pharaoh soldiers found the baby. So it was not coming from outside. It seems that the Queen Tai wanted to smuggle her son, because the midwives told her about the intention of the king. She wanted to smuggle him outside. Between her and her father's family was the lake. She wanted to smuggle him out, not in, as the Bible said. So this is the idea of. That's why, at the same time, fearing on his life, she kept him away from the royal palace. The king and the queen Amenhotep III used to live in Memphis, near Saqqara, near Cairo, modern Egypt. But he started to rebuild a new large royal palace on western Thebes, the west bank of Thebes in Luxor, in Upper Egypt. Make a royal palace. It took him about 20 years, you see. And we could not see, the American archaeologists who dug the palace could not see any evidence of Akhenaten. He was not called Akhenaten as in first. He was called Amenhotep IV. Amenhotep IV. He could not find any evidence of because every prince, every queen, everything had a small villa in the compound of the royal palace. So only in year 16, when he reached the age of 16, that Akhenaten came to the royal palace in Thebes. Yeah, because his mother was afraid that he might be killed by the priest or something. So she kept him away, first in Zaro, in northern Sinai, near Goshen, and then with her brother, he was the priest of On, Heliopolis, the priest of Ra. And then when his father, Amenhotep III, became ill, sick, and she was afraid that she might die without appointing his son as his successor, she asked for him to come to the royal palace. He came, who was 16 years old, and only because he was able to marry Nefertiti, who was the daughter of the heiress, wife of Amenhotep III and Sitamon, Queen Sitamon. Because he married the heiress, Nefertiti, he was appointed by his father as his co-regent. So Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Amenhotep IV was appointed as his co-regent with his father in Thebes. However, instead of pleasing treating the priests of Amun well, he did the contrary. He went to the Karnak compound. The Karnak is compound, have many shrines for all the Egyptian deities. So he built himself for his own god, Aton. When he came, he already had a new idea of God. He was not, Aton was his god. So he built a shrine for his god in the Karnak, at the back of the Karnak. And he did not allow anybody to come to his Aten in Karnak unless he denounced the other gods. And obviously the priests were very angry. They destroyed the temple. They forced his father to kick him out of Thebes. So he went with Nefertiti and some of his followers to built a new town called Amarna, known as Amarna now, Tel Amarna, halfway between Cairo and Luxor. And he built his own Amarna city, and he built his own, established on the temple of Aten in Amarna, and all people, his family, worshipped Aten in Amarna while his father was ruling in Thebes. However, when his father died and he became the sole ruler of Egypt, he would not allow any other god to be worshipped in Egypt. So he sent his troops to close the temples, sack the priests, and confiscate their properties. And only Aten would be burned. Even the name of all the gods were cut off from, even the name of Ammon in his father's name, Amenhotep, he cut Ammon from his father's name on the walls and that. So it was he who made that. Okay, now what happened if we compare him with Moses? In the year 17, we know that we have a document saying that the year 17 of Akhenaten was the year 1 of Tutankhamun. So that's why in the early period they believed that Akhenaten must have died in year 17 and Tutankhamun followed him. But in my research, I came out to realize that he was not, he faced a coup d'etat and he had to give up his throne, abdicate his throne to his son, Tutankhamun, and go to exile. Alain Zivi, a French archaeologist, dug out the tomb in Saqqara of a lady called Maya, who was the nurse of Tutankhamun. And in the tomb of Maya, he found a picture on the wall showing Maya sitting on a seat, and Tutankhamun, he was 9 years old when he came to the throne, sitting on her lap. Behind them, the scene representing the ministry of Tutankhamun, the first ministry of Tutankhamun. This ministry included 6 characters. One of them, was the minister of finance, was a civilian. but the other 5 were all generals of the army. The ministry, the government of Tutankhamun was 5 generals of the army. General I, General Horemheb, General Anin, General Ramses, and General Seti. And 4 of the 5 generals succeeded Tutankhamun on the throne. It is obvious that this was a coup d'etat, that there was, the military, with the help of the priesthood, made an attempt to overthrow the rule, because when all the temples of Egypt were closed, life in Egypt stopped. The temple was not only a place of worship, it was the hospital, the school, the official, course, and feasts were celebrated in the. So I think that it took more evidence came to confirm that when Flinders Petrie discovered evidence that in Sarabit, an area called Sarabit al-Khadim, a temple called Sarabit al-Khadim in Sinai, not far from Mount Sinai, was evidence of Akhenaten being there. He found the head of Akhenaten's mother, Queen Tai, in the temple of Sarabit, and he found a plate where, after Akhenaten, end of rule, the name of Aten was completely forbidden from Egypt. Horemheb made sure, the last king of the 18th dynasty, made sure that no mention of Aten at all. He even gathered all the followers of Akhenaten remaining in the country and put them in a prison, you see. So, however, during the first year of Ramses I of the 19th dynasty, we found at Sarabit al-Khadim a mention, when the king used to go to any area of the country, he used to make offering to the god of that area. And Aten Hathor was the goddess of Sinai. Nevertheless, we found at the Sarabit al-Khadim in the first year of Ramses I the name of Aten, although it was forbidden, indicating that Akhenaten was living in exile in Sarabit al-Khadim. So this is another evidence. Now, when we go to the story in the Bible, we find that the Talmud, the Bible says, obviously, that Moses killed the Egyptian, and he was afraid that Pharaoh will punish him, so he fled to Sinai to live in Sinai for exile. But the Talmud says a different story. The Talmud was written during the first 5 centuries AD. It says that Moses, after after leaving the royal palace, he went south. At the time, south of Egypt was called Ethiopia. He went south to Ethiopia, and there he found a queen called Adonai, and her husband died, was killed in fighting, so he married the queen, and Moses, according to the Talmud, became a king for this in Upper Egypt for 9 years. Before he was asked to abdicate the throne to the son of the queen and go to Sinai for exile. So the Talmud makes him a king, you see. On the other hand, in the Quran, the story also differs from the biblical story that he fled from because he killed the Egyptians. He says that while Moses was in the city, somebody came from the border of the city warning him that there was a kind of some plotting against him. People are coming to kill him and ask him to flee out of the kingdom. So the idea, was completely different. So I think this makes a comparison between Akhenaten's life. All right. Now, after Tutankhamun came to the throne, he ruled only for about 10 years, and he was killed. And he was succeeded by General I, who was a maternal cousin of Akhenaten, a brother of Queen Tai. He ruled for 4 years, and he disappeared also without, we don't know how. He was not buried in his tomb. And then we have the last king of the 18th dynasty, Horemheb, who ruled for about 13 years. Horemheb had no successors, so he appointed another General Ramses, to be the follower. Ramses became Ramses I, established the 19th dynasty, and because he came from Lower Egypt, from the very area of Goshen, the area of Zaro, he made his royal house in that area. Now we can imagine Akhenaten. We are always, we know about Moses taking a rod with him. And this rod is a little bit magical rod. It opened all the door for him, magical. But however, if we look at the scepter of the royal scepter in Egypt, it looks like a serpent, really. If you turn it around, it looks like a serpent moving. And if you have a scepter of royal scepter, how come a Bedouin guy coming from Sinai come and be allowed to enter, not only to enter the royal palace and encounter the Pharaoh himself, but the Pharaoh, instead of putting him in prison or killing him, he asks him to wait until he gets the priesthood, a priest to judge between the two of them. And according to the story, again in the Quran here, when the priest saw the scepter of Moses, they bowed to him, accepting his authority, and Pharaoh had to kill them because of that. You see, so the whole idea is really, if you put it in historical terms, we find in the life of Akhenaten the same story of Moses. So this is what I came to. Obviously, he was not. When he challenged Ramses I on the power, obviously Ramses did not agree to. Instead, he forced himself. He was a general of the army before becoming king, so he forced himself by force. Now, if you look at the area of Goshen at the time, it was surrounded by water all over the place. From the south and from the north, there were different lakes. Lake Timsah coming from Ismailia in the south, Banzala coming from the north, and then between northern Sinai and the valley of the Nile, there was a kind of a dug branch of the Nile there, guarded by. So you cannot cross unless. So what the idea of going, miraculously, breaking the water, first of all, the Bible does not say it is the Red Sea. It says Yam. Yam is a lake, ordinary lake. So because the area surrounding the Zaro, where the Pharaoh lived, was was lakes, surrounded by lakes. Moses, Akhenaten, took his followers and crossed these lakes. The water goes up to the knee, so they could flee that way. And instead of going north in the road of the Philistines, he went to the other direction. This is about what the Bible says. When the chariots of Pharaoh followed, it was stuck in the mud in the lake, so it couldn't carry on. This is more realistic rather than magical. So I believe that, this is,
Now,
this is.
now let's talk, Doc, for a moment about, you mentioned their lives, and you mentioned this concept of monotheism, where his monotheism comes from. You say that his monotheism was influenced by his mother, Queen Tai, his grandmother, Queen Tai, and his grandfather, Joseph. Do you believe that as a boy he spent time with his grandfather and his grandmother?
There is a minor possibility that he saw Joseph, when he was a little child, really. He could not have been grown up when he saw him. But I think the idea of the one God that Akhenaten got, it was not through his father or his brother or whatever it is. It is his own concept. This is the first individual who can. What happened is the idea in the royal family of Egypt that the land of Egypt belonged to the god of Egypt. Amun-Ra was the god of Egypt, and they believe in the when the Pharaoh is born, he becomes the son of God, and we have the scene in the temple of Luxor or Menhotep III. We have the scene of all the steps from the time that the Pharaoh, before going to his wife, he has to go to the temple, be purified by the holy water, and then the priest will make chants and asking the spirit of Amun to dwell in the body of the king. And then when they see a sign of that, they allow him to go to bed with his wife, so that the child born from this relationship is the son of the king physically, but the son of God spiritually. This is the concept of it. So because and if the queen was not the heiress, because the inheritance of the throne of Egypt goes through the female line, not the male line.
Right.
Whoever marries the eldest daughter of Pharaoh becomes the next Pharaoh, has the right to the next Pharaoh, to be the next Pharaoh. So the thing is, because the queen, God will marry her in a way, in the physical body of the king. So she had to be a special woman. So if the wife of the Pharaoh was not the heiress, God Amun will not come to the body of the king. So the child is not the son of God. So he has no. So the priest told Akhenaten, "You are not a legitimate son of Amun. You have no right to rule the land of Egypt." So he was faced by this point. So in return, he thought about why. I believe that the idea, the concept of a ruling God, of a powerful God, is the concept developed together with the concept of the ruler. In a small society, it's the head of the society, the chief of the tribe, the head of the town, the ruler of a country, represents the God, the image of a God in heaven. But it was during the 18th dynasty, for the first time in history, that Moses III established a great empire between the sources of the Euphrates in northern Syria and northern Sudan, you see. This was at the time, this was the known land of civilization at the time. This was all the land of civilization at the time. So, I mean, Akhenaten, in his background, must have thought, if I am not the legitimate son of Amun, but Amun is the ruler of Egypt, in whose name is the king of Egypt ruling the northern country and the southern country? And this brought him to the idea there must be a kind of a universal God, the God of all the lands, not only of Egypt. And that's why he said, Aton, in his own writing, he said, Aton is a God not only for Egypt, but also for the lands of the north and the lands of the south. It's a universal God. So he challenged the priesthood, said, I am not the son of Amun. Who is Amun? I am the son of Aton, who is the ruler of all the universe. I mean, this is the concept, yeah. I mean, this it only, not the only thing he got it from the Hebrew side, from the Israelite side, is that the Israelite patriarch did not have an image, a statue of their God. So his God had no image. Yeah, but he's a universal God. This is his own concept.
Of all mankind. Now, the next question is, Moses of the Bible is known as the lawgiver. The book of Exodus, the book of Deuteronomy are full with places where there are specific laws of worship, laws of eating, laws of believing, laws such as circumcision are all how to give the offering in the temple. So Moses becomes known to all of us as Moses the lawgiver. Were there similar laws and mores and rituals that Akhenaten observed that are similar to what became known as the Ten Commandments?
Although Akhenaten changed the God, his God is different, but the rituals, he inherited the Egyptian rituals as they are. And if you look, this is what Freud realized, that all the rituals, all the behaviors of the Israelites, according to the teaching of Moses, are found in ancient Egyptian tradition. Even the ark, the ark was, they used to place the image of their God in the ark when they go out of the temple. So he, instead of the images of God, he put the Ten Commandments. All the Ten Commandments are, are found as they are in the chapter 125 of the Book of the Dead. Yeah, there's not, the Mosaic teaching, this was recognized by Sigmund Freud. The Mosaic teaching, as they are in the Bible, are the same as the Egyptian teaching of Akhenaten.
Thank you for that answer, Dr. Osman. Final thing we want to explore is, you touched on it a bit, this Exodus. This Exodus, did Akhenaten have a period where he and his followers were forced to leave Egypt and went somewhere else? You mentioned going to Sinai. You also mentioned going to Ethiopia, or the land of Punt, where he married Queen of Ethiopia, or Queen of Punt. Do you believe that this leaving with his followers, when he was forced to abdicate the throne, do you believe this is the Exodus of the Bible?
Now, the Exodus, we see from the history side, what does it mean, the Exodus of the Israelites? It means that a group of Semites leaving Egypt to going to Canaan. This is the idea. And the only thing found in Egyptian history is which confirms that from archaeological side, is the evidence of King Seti I. Ramses I did not rule more than a year and a half. In his second year, he died. And while he was being mummified, news came from the northern Sinai border that some Bedouin tribes are attempting to leave Egypt into Canaan. Canaan, they call it Canaan, to leave Egypt into Canaan. You see, so Seti I left his father being mummified and went there and he scattered them and killed them. Some of them returned back to Sinai for the 40 years there. And some of them, he brought them to be slaughtered in the Karnak temple. And I believe it was Seti I who killed Akhenaten there, because Akhenaten was not able to enter the promised land. Akhenaten died in northern Sinai. So I believe, and there is an indication, Professor Selin, the German biblical scholar, identified a kind of a killing over them on top of the mountain of Moses. And I think he was killed there by Seti I himself. And because of that, since that time, Seti become more a new story of Seti killing Osiris, again emerged in Egypt from the 19th century on. So I think the physical evidence of Semite tribes trying to end, and after that, we find them entering over a long period of time as smaller groups going to Jordan, East Jordan, then crossing into the Holy Land.
Now, these, if in fact Moses, Akhenaten, was killed there in Sinai by Seti or the troops, it means that among these Semites were also followers of Akhenaten. Does it not?
Yes, for sure. Again, Sigmund Freud recognized that. He recognized many Egyptian names within the people who left with Moses. Yeah. Like Samir. I mean, there are many Egyptian names within the group of Moses. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosman, for this enlightening view of the life of the real Moses, Pharaoh Akhenaten, and the real Exodus.
But allow me, because I have forgotten to tell you something else. Allow me to tell you about, I was in Turin University. Turin, there was an international congress of Egyptologists in Turin. Because Akhenaten was not buried in his tomb. There's no evidence that he built himself in Ambar, that he built himself a tomb, but there was no evidence that he was ever buried there. And his mummy was not found anywhere.
Yes.
So what happened is, after writing my book about Moses and Akhenaten, I was in Turin Congress of Egyptologists. And there I met Zahi Hawass, who was the head of Egyptian antiquities. So he shouted at me and said, "How dare you say that an Egyptian pharaoh had a Jewish blood?" I told him, I mean, what do you mean? Moses was not a Jewish, he was an Israelite first of all. Then, as Muslims and Egyptians believe, Abraham was the father of both the Israelites, the Jews, and the Muslims. What's the point with the blood? What different blood are you talking about? So he was very angry. So I told him, okay, if you were to find the mummy, because Moses was killed in Sinai and we don't have any remains of his remains could not be found. So if you were to find the mummy of Akhenaten, then I will agree that it was not. So what he did, he got the chance when he became head of the antiquities, and he got from the mummy, from the museum, Cairo Museum, had a skeletal remains of a brother of Akhenaten called Siminkara. Siminkara died when he was young, between 22 and 25 years old. He died, and he was buried in Thebes. So he brought them, and it was the mum. This remains, skeletal remains, was placed in the Egyptian museum, Cairo Museum, under the name of Siminkara, who was the brother of Akhenaten. So what Hawass did is brought these remains out, and he made a test examination and said, no, this guy is not 25 years old. He died between 40 and 45 years old, and this is Akhenaten himself. And he changed the name of Siminkara, of the mummy, and he placed the name of Akhenaten, which is still until today. And he, just to prove me right, and four major, doctors, professors, anatomy examined the mummy, and they said he could not, under any circumstances, be over the age of 25 when he died, when we know that Akhenaten ended his rule when he was 34 years old. But this is what Hawass, in order to deny that he was Moses and Akhenaten were the same person.
Thank you for that. Well, we certainly meet characters along the way who have different views for their own reasons. We are comforted that your views are for the enlightenment of people, and your work was done in integrity and in truth, and we appreciate that. There was a name that we need to mention for our next segment. So now we have revealed Moses, Akhenaten, as not a figure of fiction, but a figure of fact, of flesh and blood. And we have another figure, a figure known to the world as Jesus the Christ. Was this figure a flesh and blood figure? And who was he if he lived? Dr. Osman believes that he was a flesh and blood figure, and that today the world knows him as Pharaoh Tutankhamun, the son of Pharaoh Akhenaten, or Moses the lawgiver, and that there is powerful evidence to demonstrate that Tutankhamun was the embodiment of the concept of the one God in three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This may come as very surprising news to you, but it is backed up by this professor's life work. And so in our next segment of Masters of Enlightenment with Dr. Ahmed Osman, we will look at the life of the man the world knows as Jesus the Christ, and we will examine the evidence that he has that this man was Pharaoh, Tutankhamun. Just one point to leave you with. There are two personalities that still capture the imagination of everyone in the world and are seen as the two most popular personalities known to man. One is Jesus the Christ. The second is Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Could it be the reason why these are the two most popular personalities in the world is that they are the same human being? We look forward to having you in the next segment of Masters of Enlightenment with Dr. Ahmed Osman. Dr. Ahmed Osman, thank you so much. We're so excited for the next segment. It will be more powerful than this one. So we thank you for your work. We thank you for sharing what you're so passionate about, that you've dedicated your life for. And we look forward to the next segment. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Stan.
All right.